Well, greetings and salutations, one and all, to the one and only Career Retrospectives right here on the Super Review Show Network. I'm joined by my two incredible music-loving fans, Kyle and Mike. How are you both doing tonight?
All right, what's up, guys?
Very good, very good.
Good to be back, of course. So, as many of you may or may not know, we do the show live on Monday nights EST. We're a little bit delayed on this release, because it came out back in earlier last month in May. It's already June of 2025. Can you guys believe that? No. But tonight, as the title of our podcast suggests, we're going to be talking about Sleep Tokens, even in Arcadia, their most recent release, their fourth album from this back in May 9th. It came out in 2025. Give me 1 second. I pull it up here. Mike, I know this album just came out. I feel like Mike is our most eligible person on Sleep Token, but what do you got, bud, for Sleep Token as a band and going into this album?
Well, I don't have much. I have a lot of people I know who listen to Sleep Token, and I myself really kind of liked and disliked their last album, Take Me Back to Eden. That was like where I initially started with them. I kind of like jumped around in the some of the previous material just to kind of listen to the favorite songs, the stuff that everybody was clamoring about. And this fan base it's a very it's a very strong fan base. It's very like relevant and kind of like a bulldozer right now. And everywhere you go, any shop you go in that's like music related, you see Sleep Token like plastered all over the walls and front and center. So in that regards to them being a band that I think I personally wanted to kind of experience and see what they bring to the table. Their last album I felt was a very, very strong, a strong release on some regards, but it was very hit or miss on the back half of it. So coming into this, I just really didn't have much else to go on besides that. I wasn't like an original fan. And like just kind of stepping into this, I have a couple friends who I talked to about the band and how we perceive it. And that's pretty much it I have for that on my background.
Kyle, I forget. You're somewhat into them? I forget exactly. What do you got, bud?
Not at all into them.
Oh, okay.
Actually, not that I'm not like one of those people that absolutely hates them or anything like that. I just feel like this is a band that either you love or it's just not your thing. I mean, I'll never be against any act that is bringing slightly, heavier elements to the mainstream. This is definitely a band that could be people's gateway into getting into heavier music. I do find it slightly confusing a lot, specifically in this album and a bit of their last one. When people refer to them as a metal band, they're really not. There just happen to be musicians that incorporate some metal elements into it. I didn't become, I don't know about Mike, but I became only aware of them a couple years back when Take Me Back to Eden was released. That's kind of, when they blew up, in the mainstream consciousness. Other than that, that's the first exposure I had to them. Wasn't my thing. So, going into this album was kind of like, am I going to like this? Am I going to feel the same way about it as I did their last record? Is it going to be more of the same? And, I'll get into that when we talk about the music. But, never been a huge fan. But like Mike said, you can't escape Sleep Token. You go on any music page online, it's all Sleep Token hype for the past 2 years. Go to any record store, Sleep Token everywhere. I mean, their aesthetic is cool as hell. I'll give them that. That's really one way to stand out. So, total respect for the guys in the band.
Yeah, I'm in a very similar, more in line with Kyle to an extent here with my knowledge of Sleep Token. This is one of those examples where I had only heard the name of the band, as Kyle just said, in the past 1 to 2 years, maybe 2023 you heard about them, maybe 2023, but I did hear about them last year in 2024, but I only heard the name. But I appreciate when there's at least a heavier sounding band, or heavier sounding band that can reach mainstream people like me who listen to a majority of like the stuff I listen to is like majority of the stuff I listen to is old newer stuff by older artists from like the 70s, 80s, etc. But the fact that I could at least for Sleep Token, I've heard the name. That's about it. But going to this, I was like, I don't know. We'll talk about the music in a second, but it's kind of like I'm not gonna say it's all over the place, but you'll hear our opinions in a second with what we have to say about this record that came out. Again, that's my knowledge. I've never heard of them, and outside of until like last year, I was like, oh, Sleep Token, I've heard the name. That's it. I haven't really dived in. This is the first album I've listened to by them. Could the music be better, worse, or we're gonna get into that right now. Why don't we jump back over to Mike for a second? Some of our not our track breakdown one by one, but what we normally do here. Mike, what do you got for just your love of the music, the tracks? What do you got?
So I'll start off with my standout tracks. So kind of just going back again. Take Me Back to Eden had a bunch of really strong like bangers on it. Like it had music that I really felt defined songwriting. It used its elements kind of well, mixed them well. Um, it did fall on a bunch of certain crutches that it does throughout each song, and they kind of followed that structure. And this album is a far more overused version of their previous album in the term of structure. So a lot of songs fell into a certain structure. They all had the same kind of like um uh, you know the way they write. We're going to start off with heartfelt lyrics and vocals. We're going to go into a possible beat with a certain cadence that they do reuse a lot throughout their previous album and this one. And then they drop the heaviness in there um, without really a direction when it comes to the melody of the riffs in the guitar. The guitars simply serve as a voice of heaviness, which uh doesn't sit well with me in a lot of songs where I need the heaviness to have a voice of actual melody within its heaviness. And there's only a couple songs on this album that do that. One being Gethsemane. That is one of the songs that I feel has an actual, the only song, maybe Emergence, that has a melody in the metal part of it that actually continues throughout the song and kind of like claims the idea of writing a guitar riff within a rock metal hip hop R&B, I don't know what else you want to call this mashup. But so taking those words that I just said and kind of applying them to where I felt the strongest tracks existed are the songs that did not follow the structure of Sleep Token, and once again, reiterating, start off with the heartfelt vocals and like a piano or like quiet, then to beat, then to metal, then back to that, then back to the heaviness, and then close. That's pretty much the structure throughout the whole album. And, sans a couple songs that have no beat within them. But so my standout tracks, Emergence, absolute 10 out of 10. Love this song. Really captivating vocals. It does everything together and combines them together, and that's its strongest moments when it can, instead of just doing each part individually, like here's this part, then here's this part, and here's this part. It still does that to some degree in this. You got your opening vocals, you got your beat, you have your drop of heaviness, then back to um, you know, the beat, and then back to the heaviness, and then it closes out with a really cool saxophone and kind of cool, kind of like jazzy kind of ending that really just kind of closes out the song. But in all of that, it's able to take all those elements and actually do them a little more fluidly. Like it feels like it all belongs in the song and part of the song. The rap part in it, which comes along with those genty guitars over top of it, which I really like. Once again, they don't do that too much. They just do the rap part without the guitars. This song does it, which makes it special. Overall, just a great song, stuck in my head for like days and days and days. But then as you kind of go down the album, you kind of hear reuses of different phrasing and the way the vocals kind of do certain layering, certain melodies that they do feel reused. Another standout song for me was Dangerous. I really liked that song. I felt like it still had the usual trend that they've been following, but um, there were some good melodies when stuff that gets stuck, has a catchiness to it, accomplishes what it sets out, and it does it well. There, and I'll just note this song right now, the Caramel song. As much as like a lot of people like gave it crap about the reggaeton beat and everything, I actually enjoy that being something they used, but I felt it was misused because they didn't really do anything with it besides just kind of use it and then phase it out to whatever. It could have been over top of the heavy guitars. It could have done so much more. And I think that's one of my major takeaways. This band does not capitalize on things. They just kind of showcase them and then move on to the next part. And other than that, Dangerous and Emergence were my top songs. I didn't have too much to find in this album that I could really like bite into.
And you know what, Mike? I completely agree with you on that point of this is a band, at least on this record, I can't really speak. I didn't listen to the entirety of Take Me Back to Eden. I don't know their music prior to that. My biggest point with this record is there's so much on here that has promise throughout the songs, but it's not capitalized on at almost any point. Like it just goes on, the song starts, and then a heavy part happens for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then it just stops and goes right back to something else. And I'm like, but that part was cool. Why did you not do more with that? Or like there'll be a part like in the intro track. Way too long of an intro for me. Especially for something that I didn't think it built enough on it. Had like that weird lo-fi, almost like an 8-bit instrumental sound to it that just didn't work. But like it does this throughout. And there's, like you said, there's rap parts here and there. A lot of the songs blended together for me. Funny enough, your two top songs are two of my bottom songs, as always.
Yep.
I didn't really find much on here that I enjoyed. I actually found myself actively disliking this record for a majority of it. I felt it to be incredibly boring at times. And then, like I said, when something exciting happened, it wasn't capitalized on. When there would be a memorable vocal hook, it would go away. Or when there would be some kind of cool instrumental, they would forego it just to go back to, his style of vocals is not one that I'm generally a fan of, whether it be, in pop music, rock, metal, whatever. Not my style of vocal. But where I thought the album actually was pretty backloaded, where you got to Caramel, and that was up to that point in the album. I thought that was the best song up to that point. I agree. It's not great. I don't think they do enough with it, but this is the first track where I thought that like emotion actually really came through on it. I don't like it enough to like seek it out to go listen to it, but I see why people would enjoy this one. But then where this album really came into its own for me was like the last 3 tracks. Specifically Damocles, but I'll get to that in a second. Infinite Baths was actually, I thought, a really good closer here. Really solid ending to the album. It's lyrically very well done song. I think it's very well structured, actually blends the multiple genres and sounds well that I think a lot of the other tracks didn't necessarily do. But Damocles, I'm surprised, Mike, this is not in your top. This was a 10 out of 10 song for me on an album where most tracks were 2s and 3s. This song is incredibly impressive to the point I've been listening to it for the past couple of days, like just on repeat.
Wow.
Best song on the album, best Sleep Token song I've heard by far. No contest. I don't know what happened here compared to the rest of the album, but it's a cohesive track that builds upon itself all the way to the end. The piano in this one is beautifully done. The vocal melody is great. The lyrics are the best of the record. The drum fills at the end of this track, absolutely incredible. He kills it on that. And just the way the song just builds from the start and then slowly builds till it's at the end like that, it's so well done. I mean, that's a 10 out of 10 there. If the entire album was like this, I would get the hype for this band a little bit more. This album seems to be getting more mixed reviews than the previous record did. So, we'll do with that what we will. But for me, this album really came into its own at the end. I was not into this at all. I actually started to get album fatigue by track 4 on this one, I'm going to be honest. And then it did pick up toward the end and kind of set itself aside a bit. But like I said, biggest problem I had was the fact that some ideas in here just didn't seem to be fully fleshed out. I think that I would actually almost prefer the band without the shoehorned in metal elements. Like, I don't know if they're just keeping that going now because, like, that's their shtick and they feel like they have to keep doing it. But a lot of the times on this album, it felt like it did not fit. So that's kind of where I'm at. My top 2, Damocles and Infinite Baths, and it's not even close.
Yeah, and for me, it's a similar. I'm kind of in the middle of both of you. Like I tend to be like. It always comes down to this, doesn't it? Where we get to an album like this, and I'm in the middle. But I'm going to be real with both of you for a second, though. There are some really. When I first turned on this album on Spotify and I was listening to it, I was like, "Oh my god, new album! Gonna give it a shot. Gotta review it." I want to just kind of like cluster all of my thoughts into one statement here by saying there's a lot of different elements of, as we mentioned, hip hop. There's a lot of elements of prog metal on here, or progressive rock in general, and some other elements in here too. One thing I can appreciate though is Sleep Token trying to diversify their sound even more than they already. I haven't listened to their previous albums. I'm just saying that as a viewer and a listener to telling you, but I can honestly tell you that this is a very strong, a very solid attempt to do something that I think is very difficult, truthfully, to make an album that has so many different parts, like the hip hop layer, an alternative rock layer, a alternative metal layer, progressive metal. Like, there's so many different elements on here too. Like, even like the melodies and stuff. Like, there's so much different elements going on in this one album. There's a reason why it's 56 minutes and 30 seconds long, because each song kind of definitely. I will say that it's not for me. I would not go back to it, but I appreciate what it's doing though for rock or rock, quote unquote. Like I would just artists and bands progressing towards the mainstream. I will say this too. I was just checking out the chart performance for the singles that got released. I was in shock too that when I on my own spare time doing that, I did it just now as well. But these songs are charting in the Hot 100 as well. I know that some people that doesn't matter and stuff like that. Like, oh, it's a chart, or they're selling out or whatever. Like, Metallica did that in 1991 with the Black Album, whatever. But at the same time, I can appreciate on that level that enough people are listening to this album where songs as unique and as so diversifying of a sound. I can't really pinpoint a specific, like, obviously there's prog metal, there's metal, but then there's hip hop elements in there too. I can't really pinpoint what this album is other than it being its own thing. And I appreciate I appreciate the listeners of Sleep Token and listeners of this album having songs like this chart on mainstream, like what Taylor Swift, like when she took over like all 40 spots with the Tortured Poets department. I appreciate what people are doing by, hey, let's have rock on the charts again. So MGK did that with Tickets to My Downfall and stuff like that. I appreciate them, like people wanting to seek out this band and seek out this music and listen to it enough to the point where it charts, because that's a very to me, that's a big thing. It may not matter to you, but it matters to me at least. That's happening, which I could not appreciate anymore, truthfully, because I'm a big fan of music and how it can change lives and how it can still and it can still be a driving force, especially rock music today too. But no, my standout tracks. I only have 2 standout tracks for me on this record. It's actually, truthfully, it's not the title track, Mike and Kyle. It's not the title track. As because I know there, I saw it there. I was like, oh, the title track. It's there. But Caramel and ironically enough, Damocles, to both of your points that you made. I'm not going to go too much into it, as you guys mentioned before. You just said, but these are just really solid tracks, and they're only like 6 or 7s out of 10. But that's because I did not know what to expect. I was taken back by how much different elements were in here, and that's why it's a difficult rating to give when I give my rating in a minute. But yeah, that's a lot of stuff. It's a lot to quote Mike. It's a lot to digest in this album because there's so much going on between the hip hop, the prog metal, the alternative metal. Like there's so much going on. It's hard. It's like trying to eat a whole steak in one bite. It looks delicious. It tastes really good, but you can't swallow it in one bite. You got to take your time and chew it. If so to speak. And that's what I not literally, but figuratively did with this record. I had to like digest it bit by bit, track by track, and it worked out well. But yeah,
well, I also just want to point out you're talking about like chart positions.
Yeah,
the album itself debuted at #1 on the Billboard.
That's huge.
It only stayed there for a week. It's in its second week.
But still,
I guess in its third week now, but its second week moved down to #6. But considering who else is on that chart, it's very impressive for this kind of act.
I completely agree with you on that, and that's what I was. I don't want to chime too much on that, but I follow that kind of stuff too a little bit. I was like, oh my god, this debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 and the UK as well. Like, what's happening? There's something happening out there, and it's very interesting to say this, but it should be cool to keep see where they go from here. I'd be curious to see what they do after the chart success going on with this record and their next record. You know what I mean? Like in like 2 or 3 years from now, when the album cycle kind of ends for this one. So curious to see. That's what I have to say about my standout tracks and my opinions and thoughts of this record, truthfully.
Yeah, and like I'll just go ahead and go with my lowest tracks as well as
Sure.
just kind of reiterating because it's unfortunate that this band has so much talent to write good songs, but continues to kind of use the same format for each and every song. I mean, literally, they all start the same exact way.
They
You
sure
have to
do.
start. It's nuts. It really is nuts, and it kind of, I hate to take a swipe at this current generation as well as people who are listening to kind of like trap and like hip hop, R&B, maybe not R&B old school, but like mumble rap, kind of like stuff that is being put out on like the mainstream. But like a lot of those songs they're predictable because they have the same format, and I think Sleep Token, knowing that, reaches their fan base in a more direct way by giving them exactly what they expect when they expect it, in a way to kind of keep the brain from getting bored with the song. And I think like a lot of the times they start slow, but then they jump into the next part at the almost identical kind of structure, to a point where it's almost like you're training those people who are listening to it. So I found that happening, and it just became so predictable and so kind of like I waited for a song to open up with some just straight guitars, and I know they wouldn't do that because like to do that would be to violate their structure. Just straight start off like a rock song, and it just didn't happen because I just feel like they're not interested in doing something that feels like a natural song where you write this riff and then you add this rap part and then you add this singing and then it's all structured the same exact way, which is disappointing for the person who wants to hear a song that just feels like natural. Past Self was my lowest rated song, just simplistic, thin, lacking depth. It just really very shallow direction development. It just felt like uh kind of a gimmicky kind of song. And like the album's called Even in Arcadia. There are a lot of arcade like features on this that open up with arcade like kind of sounding um intros. Look to Windward, like the opening of that, Past South Caramel, Infinite Bass. They all have a very kind of like music box childlike opening to them, almost like it sounds like something like uh that's uh, dialing into the more simplistic melodies that you kind of open a song with. Another low point for me also was the title track, Even Arcadia. It got straight to the point, but not in a way that really felt like it did anything to build the fire that they're kind of trying to do, and they do in a lot of songs. So yeah, other than that, there's just a lot of basic fives and sixes for me, and nothing horrible, but nothing that like blew me out of the water like Emergence, and then just Dangerous was like a 7.5. I really appreciate that kind of thing. But it's so well crafted and formula, and it just lacks the ability to kind of bring them all together. And I think that like it just uh, suffers from that quite frequently. And I just wish that some of the previous songwriting had kind of made its way to this album, and it just feels less like it was able to like they felt less desire, like the desire of their direction is to put out songs that are more of a natural song, but more so just like heartfelt vocals alongside um the rhythm beats, and a couple metal drops that have no real definition, but to add a heaviness to a song in order to create an atmosphere.
Yeah, Kyle, you got any comments on that, or what do you, anything at all? Or
Yeah, I'm not going to go into like specifics about my least favorites. I think I kind of hit on all my points of contention with the album. I will say I agree, Mike. Even in Arcadia, the title track, one of my least favorites on here.
Yeah.
I found it to be an insanely boring song. I thought it blended in with just about everything else on the album. Off the top of my head, I could not pull out to you a single thing from that song right now off the top of my head that I remember. But I also lyrically, Provider had the worst lyrics of this album. Really not great. Musically, it wasn't the worst here, but lyrically, it actually like took me out of it. I was like, oh, this is it's kind of corny. Just didn't fit in lyrically with the rest of the album. I thought, I will say lyrically, the guy has some pretty like emotion fueled lyrics. Does a pretty good job on that. This song just did not do that. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm just gonna go my overall album rating here.
Sure,
I'm going to 4. It's not for me. I struggle to really get into this, and it's a band I wish I could get into. I've tried a few times, with the singles and things here and there, and with this album, I just can't get into the hype. Like I said, though, Damocles, one of my favorite songs of the year so far. Cannot sing the praise of that song high enough. I wish I saw more of that on this album, but it is what it is. I don't get the hype behind them. At 4.
Yeah, and I'm in a similar boat. I mean, coming into it with no knowledge of the band other than just hearing a name. Oh, Sleep Token. I would have assumed it'd be a metal band. Everything included, like tracks, chart performance, all the above, things like that. I have to give it a 4.5, unfortunately, mainly because of it's the unknown of after listening to it and going into it and realizing I can't really take much away from it. It's kind of just there, needless to say, unfortunately. It's not for me. Where there's some tracks where I'd be like, as I mentioned, there's 2 or 3 solid tracks that I really enjoyed a lot. But as far as just an overall album, it's hard to, I'll go back to my steak analogy, because it's hard to digest an album that's as big as this with different elements, different tastes. Like this is like having a steak with like butter and with potatoes and stuff, and or green beans, and you're trying to digest this whole thing, and you gotta take it song by song, bit by bit. And sure enough, this is just a really ultimately the steak did not do that well for me. I ended up throwing up afterwards, but not literally, figuratively, of course. But no, but needless to say, this is a very, if this is your thing, fantastic. Couldn't be more happy for you. But for me personally, it's just I maybe if I listen to their previous work too, I could get more into it. I full power to them for having the hype of like the charts and the Hot 100 and the chart performance on the album and stuff like that too. Debuting at #1, that's fantastic. Can't wait for the next one too to do that too. But yeah, no, this is a very, very unique album. Needless to say, in a semi good way. That's me personally. I'm sending a 4.5. I could 5 is pushing it. 4.5 is good for me. So yeah, that's gonna do it for our Sleep Token review. We have next week picked out.
I still have to do mine.
Mike, why did you remind me? No, I'm just kidding, Mike. What do you got? Go ahead.
Just to go back to one thing you almost said by accident when you were
I'm
saying
sorry.
mainstream media. You almost said mainstream media,
I
which
sure
kind
did.
of made me think of what way to reach the screaming metal community with some, like entry level kind of metal sprinkled alongside of some R&B and other types of elements. And like Caramel, the end of Caramel had the most over drag like continued screaming and hard heaviness of the entire album, and it almost felt comical, like as if someone's like, all right, let's give it to them. And it was like so long and extreme that I thought to myself, boy, it really feels like they're trying to kind of like offset the opening of this song with something that's opposite for the sole fact of doing it, not because it continues throughout the whole album. And it just was like, it just made me laugh and think to myself, like, it feels very manufactured, the whole thing, how long something happens, when it happens. So that gave me a negative half point off of my rating. So I was at a 5.5, and then I kind of dumbed it down to a 5 straight. Just only a few moments of that feel like they do the formula, but are more blending of how they're used together versus just doing them alongside each other and not being able to like fully sell the construction of the song and how it kind of all fits in the right place.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't mean to cut you off there with your
But you're good, man. You're
cutting
good.
off your final rating there, of course. No, but this is as you heard from us personally, this is just a very, very mixed bag reaction to us. An album that looked like it had looked like it had a lot of promise, truthfully. But no, needless to say though, I think we're good now. I think we covered a lot of Sleep Token from the day, if I'm not mistaken. So that's gonna do for us, right, guys? We have our next thing picked out, which is not an album. We're actually doing a career discography breakdown, if I'm not mistaken, right? Right, Kyle, right?
Yep. Yeah, man.
All right, yes. So yeah, we want to thank you all for watching, listening, however you enjoyed us tonight. Thanks so much for joining to our podcast as always. So next week we have not done this in a little bit, but here we are today. Mike's so happy about this. We're doing a career discography breakdown of Panic at the Disco. I landed on my pick last week when you didn't hear this or see this live, so don't worry. But next week we're gonna be doing a career discography breakdown of all 7 albums by Panic at the Disco. Mike is beyond thrilled, and somewhere he's like, "Boo!" He's like, "Boo!"
We'll see. We'll see. I don't want to give away, my reactions.
No,
But
of course.
maybe it'll hit me with some good stuff. Who knows?
I feel like Death of a Bachelor is going to be your album, but that's just that's I'm just throwing it out there. We'll have to see, of course. No, and but I want to thank, as always, the 2 gentlemen for doing this podcast with me, as always. Kyle and Mike, your knowledge is unparalleled. It is fantastic. Don't ever change. You're doing a fantastic job. And Kyle, Q&A podcast is not back yet.
Nope. Still
Okay. All right, it's been on hold because the birth of his fantastic little baby boy. But yeah, and now Mike's gone too. It's okay. But thank you so much for watching, listening. How you enjoyed tonight. But for all of us here at Super Review Show's Crew Retrospectives, please stay safe, take care, and
God bless.
God bless.